Hello there, here's John Franquist with President number 15 in our presidential series, James Buchanan. He's the last of our long list of do-nothing presidents that we've been talking about lately. And what's kind of funny is James Buchanan is so inconsequential and so much of a do-nothing that when people talk about James Buchanan today, what they ask is, was he gay? Let's get into that right away, right now, and get that out of the way. Buchanan never married. He had a fiancée once in his youth. He was going to marry her. We don't know what happened. Now, this fiancée, they say she was a little bit unstable and she broke off the engagement. We have no idea why. There were rumors that there were other women. There might have been rumors of any other kind. Point being is, she broke off the engagement and then some say she died of hysteria, which makes no sense. The suspicion now is that she may have committed suicide. Now, Buchanan wrote a letter to her parents and asked to be one of the pallbearers. He could carry the coffin. They returned his letter unopened, and this hurt him very, very much. We don't know why the parents treated him this way, why the engagement was broken up. What the rumor was, we don't know. Now, what we do know, going back to the original question, was that Buchanan did have a friend named Rufus King. He lived with his friend for 10 years. That doesn't mean anything. They may have been roommates, but basically they did live together. And when Buchanan went to a party, he didn't bring some girlfriend that he was courting or anything. He always brought his buddy, Rufus King. Then when Rufus King moved on, he moved out of the house or something, and Buchanan stayed in D.C. later on. He missed his friend, and he actually wrote a letter. Now, back in those days, we have to keep in mind letters are very florid. People spoke very poetically and so forth. And Buchanan wrote a letter stating something like, I can't find any men to woo. Maybe I want to play some cards or have a drink. Now, when do men woo other men? If they want to play cards or have a drink, I mean, you just say, hey, buddy, you want to have a drink? This woo is it raises questions in my book. Again, doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it does raise some questions. But basically, we don't know. Okay, going on. He became president. His niece was kind of the hostess because he had no first lady. And now I have to mention a slave named Dred Scott. Dred Scott was a slave who traveled a lot with his master. They traveled to free states and slave states. The master died. Dred Scott wanted his freedom. He said because he was in a free state, he should be a free man. He took this all the way through the courts. The courts said no. They said, first of all, Dred Scott can't bring a case to court because he's not a citizen. He is property of his master. Second of all, they said that the Missouri Compromise was unconstitutional. It was hindering the rights of slave owners to travel. So we're getting into a very bad area. If the Missouri Compromise, which was a compromise between the North and South, is being called unconstitutional by the courts, that is not good. The favorite word that Buchanan had would be unconstitutional. He mentioned at one point that freeing the slaves would be unconstitutional. That also he believed in union and the states would not secede and leave, but he also said stopping them would be unconstitutional, basically saying that they had the right to leave, even though he didn't want them to. He was very indecisive, didn't know what to do. He believed in expanding the land, land expansion, let the U.S. acquire more territory, but he wanted to respect the rights of the people that lived there. This is a very divisive time when we needed a president to be solid on one side or the other. What does he want to do? He didn't take sides. And he wanted to be known as George Washington. He had aspirations to be one of the greatest presidents the country has ever seen, and he was very wrong on that issue. He did make a speech one time to please the South and said that the slave owners were actually humane and kind. Now, two laws were put before Buchanan. One of them was an act, I should say, that would the government would give 230 million acres of land in territories outside the states, but within the today's continental U.S. in those territories, and sell very, very cheaply small parcels of land so that anybody, you could be a slave, you could be a free African-American, a woman or a man, you could buy a piece of land and have a small farm where you don't need slaves, rather than have all these thousands of acres with slaves working out there. Now, obviously, the North liked this because it would stop the expansion of slavery. Slave owners did not. Another law that was an act that was put forward before Buchanan was, can we give some land over to the different states so they can open up education? public universities and so forth. Buchanan said no to both measures. He said that each state should take care of their own. So he didn't sign anything. 1857, there was a panic, there was a crash, and the economy was very bad. To be fair to Buchanan, he did put some measures in that did help, but it was a little bit too late for him as far as by the time these measures took effect and the economy got better, he was pretty much out of office. In Utah, Governor Brigham Young, just to give you an idea of the chaos, Governor Brigham Young, Buchanan wanted to replace him, but he forgot to tell Brigham Young. So when they sent some people over there to replace Brigham Young, violence broke out. Brigham Young didn't know who these people were. And they clarified the matter and he was replaced. But it gives you an idea of the chaos that was happening over here, the disorganization. There was a stalemate in Congress. Congress would not pass any laws that he gave them, but he would veto any laws they put before him. Nothing was getting done. Nothing at all. There was even a committee that wanted to impeach Buchanan. Final point, and very important, Fort Sumter, South Carolina. Federal fort in South Carolina, slave state. People were afraid that the South was going to grab Fort Sumter, and in effect, Civil War began because of Fort Sumter, but we'll get that in the next video. But in this video, Fort Sumter, Buchanan sent reinforcement. He sent a steamship full of weapons and so forth to reinforce that federal fort in South Carolina. Southerners attacked the steamship, started throwing things at it, they attacked it. The Northerners wanted Buchanan to retaliate against South Carolina. He didn't do that, but he didn't send the reinforcements later on either. He didn't take sides. He was a champion of inaction, so much so that when the Civil War broke out, people called it Buchanan's War. Well, anyway, 1860 comes along, an election is held, Buchanan is not even chosen, pretty much. Abraham Lincoln, a Republican, becomes president. And everybody knew that Abraham Lincoln was anti-slavery, very anti-slavery, and actually spoke that he would try to stop slavery. So the South rebelled. 2 months after Buchanan left office, the Civil War broke out. And people called it Buchanan's War because it was, in great measure, was due to his action, or should I say inaction. I'm happy to say that we're done with all these do-nothings, not very well-known presidents that we had to get through, and we're going to get to Abraham Lincoln in my next video, and we got a lot to talk about, American Civil War. In the meantime, this is John Franquez. Subscribe, comment below. Bye.